Marcos and his brother, Juan, are on one of their usual excursions, leading their small herd of goats through the dense forest that surrounds their village. After a long and tiring hike, the two brothers finally reach the bank of a crystal-clear river that goes through the forest. The sight of the cool, inviting water is too tempting to resist, especially given the sweltering heat of the day. Without a second thought, they decide to take a break and cool off by going for a swim. They wade into the river, feeling the refreshing embrace of the water wash over them. Laughter and splashes fill the air as they indulge in this unexpected moment of leisure. On the opposite shore, a small group of wolves observes the two humans with keen interest. Their sleek gray fur blends seamlessly with the forest surroundings, and their intelligent eyes are locked onto Marcos and Juan. These wolves are not the menacing creatures of folklore, but rather curious inhabitants of the wilderness, cautiously monitoring the intruders in their territory. As Marcos and Juan swim and frolic in the river, the wolves maintain a respectful distance. These woods are home to many creatures, each with their own role to play. After their refreshing swim, Marcos and Juan emerge from the river, their bodies invigorated by the cool water. They retrieve their clothes and begin dressing. As they resume their trek, leading their goats along the forest path, they encounter the wolves. The wolves start to attack their goats, and Marcos and Juan rush to their defense. They throw rocks and sticks at the wolves, but the wolves are not deterred. The wolves are a pack, and they are much stronger and more agile than Marcos and Juan. They quickly overwhelm the goats. 5 of the goats were killed by the wolves, and the 2 boys decide to return home, informing their family about the incident. When Marcos and Juan go home to tell their mother about the attack of the wolves, their mother scorns them. She tells them that they are irresponsible and that they should have been more careful. She says that they have lost all of their goats and that they will now have to go hungry. For Marcos and Juan, the heartbreak of losing their goats is compounded by a grievous decision made by their father. Unable to bear the weight of their financial losses, their father chooses to sell Marcos into servitude to the local boss as a means of compensation. Marcos vehemently refuses to leave his family unless his beloved brother, Juan, accompanies him on this uncertain journey. The following morning, as tensions run high and emotions clash, their father takes charge, placing Marcos atop his horse. But Marcos, unwavering in his resolve, refuses to budge. The bond between the brothers is unbreakable, and Marcos will not take a step forward without Juan by his side. Marcos and his father reach the landlord, who calls Seferino to take the kid to the Valley of Silence, a remote area in the Sierra Morena Mountains, to help Atanasio, an old goat herder who has been injured. Marcos looks at his father with a mixture of anger and sorrow, his eyes pleading for understanding. He knows that this journey will separate him from his family, and his heart aches at the thought. As the two of them set off on horseback toward the Valley of Silence, the landscape transforms gradually. Dense forests give way to rocky terrain, and the air grows thin and crisp. The Sierra Morena Mountains loom ominously in the distance, their peaks disappearing into the clouds. The journey ahead is uncertain and full of danger. Seferino and Marcos meet Atanasio as the former leaves more wheat to them for this summer. However, he is supposed to leave them 5 more sacks of wheat, but he refuses until the old man reveals the place of El Balila, which is a group of young men hiding at the mountains. Anastasio begins to teach Marcos the art of goat herding with a simple yet effective method. He hands Marcos 2 wooden boxes, each securely tied to a leather strap that he places around Marcos's neck. The boxes are filled with smooth pebbles, and Anastasio explains their purpose. As each goat enters the pen, Marcos, Anastasio instructs, "You put 1 pebble from this box into the other." This helps you keep track of how many goats you have herded, and it's a time-tested way to ensure none are left behind. Marcos nods attentively, eager to learn from the experienced goatherd. With the pebbles ready and a newfound sense of responsibility, he joins Anastasio in guiding the goats toward the pen. Anastasio shows Marcos where to sleep in the cave surrounded by the fire and hand him a rabbit to cut and eat. Anastasio prepares his own food, leaving the kid to know how to make his own food. The little kid sleeps while trying, but unfortunately fails. In the early morning, the little kid wakes up following Anastasio without being seen. Anastasio uses his ferret animal, which is an agile animal that is good at following scents, to hunt rabbits. Marcos loves the animal, and now he knows the technique the old man uses to get them food. The next day, they go together for the goat herding as Anastasio teaches Marcos how to cure a goat that injured its leg. Lessons continue as this time the old man sends the little kid to get rosemary from the forest, and the wolf comes and takes it from him. Anastasio responds, "Luckily you had the rabbit, because otherwise he would have attacked you." He teaches the boy that by giving wolves little food, from time to time, he can get along with them and not kill his goats. While they try to sleep, a group of people enters the cave as Marcos becomes upset. Anastasio calms him down by saying this is El Balilla. It turns out El Balilla is a group of young men opposing the regime, and they are considered fugitives. Anastasio comments that Ceferino refused to give him the 5 sacks of wheat unless he revealed their hiding place. Every now and then they come to visit Anastasio, whom they decide to leave for not to jeopardize his life, as they are outlaws who haven't slept for 4 days and are chased by 50 civil guard. After that, Anastasio and Marcos get back to sleep as the latter asks the former why he lives alone and where is his family. Anastasio answers that he was in the mountains with the goats. Suddenly, he heard a bombardment. He ran back down to the village. When he got home, his family except for his brother Thomas was dead. Thomas later went out into the streets to fight. That is why he lived here in grief, as he has lost everything. They hear some gunshots. It sounds like civil guards have caught El Balilla. The next morning, the old man feels under the weather and asks the little boy to go, on his own, herding the goat for the first time. While he is outside, he gets along with a wolf that he names Little Wolf. He calls it Little Wolf and feeds it holding food in his hand. He gets back to the old man, who is dying, to inform him that he controlled the wolf and became his friend. Marcos loves the new resident and asks the old man to get better by offering some hot herbs as he is not going to leave the place. The next morning, his relationship with the little wolf strengthens, but he finds Anastasio on the ground. Marcos finds Anastasio in the forest. Anastasio is on the ground, breathing heavily. Marcos gets scared and runs to him. Anastasio looks very pale, and he's holding his chest, telling Marcos that he has to seek help from Thomas, who is the leader of El Balilla. Anastasio passes away in the wilderness after giving the kid a necklace to protect him. Marcos cries heavily as from now on he is alone in the Valley of Silence. He digs a shallow grave with a makeshift shovel he fashioned from a tree branch, the dirt softening under his determined efforts. Marcos, the kid, doesn't know what to do after the death of Anastasio, the old man. Marcos relies on the survival skills he learned from Anastasio during their time together. He knows how to find edible plants, purify water, and create makeshift tools and weapons from natural resources. He remembers what Anastasio told him about the importance of survival, and he vows to do whatever it takes to stay alive. He now drinks milk directly from the goat, sleeps with a knife in his hand, sets fire every night, and uses his Monero to hunt rabbits. One day, as Marcos prepares to hunt a rabbit, nature's harsh reality intervenes. A majestic eagle, soaring above, spots the rabbit too. With astonishing precision, the eagle swoops down, snatching the rabbit in its talons. Driven by hunger and determination, Marcos sets his sights on the eagle's nest, where the rabbit is now destined to become a meal for the hungry eagle chicks. He begins his perilous ascent up the tree, inching his way toward the nest perched high in the branches. In an unfortunate twist of fate, just as he reaches the nest and extends his hand to retrieve the rabbit, He fails to balance himself and falls. Groaning in agony, he examines his left hand and quickly realizes that he has broken it in the fall. He recalls the lessons Anastasio imparted to him about wilderness survival. Marcos fashions a makeshift splint using 2 sturdy sticks, binding them securely around his broken hand. Though the pain is excruciating, he knows he has taken the first step toward healing and ensuring he can continue his journey in the unforgiving wilderness. As he sits there, nursing his wounded hand, Marcos is determined to overcome the challenges that lie ahead in this harsh and unforgiving world. He wants to find some food by fishing with his own hands. He fails, but the little wolf sees everything. He goes to his cave and falls asleep. Little Wolf offers food to Marcos as a gesture of friendship. Every time the little wolf shares food with Marcos, Marcos adopts some of the little wolf behaviors. He imitates his sounds and gestures, learning to communicate with them in their own language. He can easily now howls to him to come and offer food. One morning, Ceferino comes calling Anastasio's name. He finds that no one is in the cave, but there is fire. He unzips his pants and, in a desperate attempt to extinguish the flames, he begins to urinate on the fire. Marcos can see everything as he is hiding behind a rock, but he doesn't want to approach. However, Ceferino hears a rock movement, meaning that there is someone hiding from him. Doubtfully, he is trying to approach the rock, but his friend calls him to see something. Ceferino is shocked to see Anastasio's remains. He kneeled down and touched the bones, commenting that Anastasio had died without saying anything. He calls his friend to get the goats and decides to leave. Once Marcos sees him leaving, he runs to the cave trying to blow the extinguished fire to set it again. All of a sudden, Ceferino appears and catches the little boy asking him about the place of El Balilla. Marcos responds that he doesn't know anything, and Ceferino decides to take him on his horse. Suddenly, the little wolf leaps out of the bushes and frightens Ceferino. Ceferino tries to hold his gun. Marcos seizes the opportunity and takes the gun, running away as fast as he could, while Lobo keeps Ceferino at bay. Little Wolf runs with Marcos, but Ceferino comments, "We will see who has the last word." Winter arrives, and Ceferino decides to come again and hunt the little wolf. He shoots at a pack of wolves, and some of them, including Little Wolf, get hurt. The little wolf runs to a cave to hide. Marcos sees the blood trail and follows it to the cave. He finds the little wolf shivering and weak. He carries the little wolf back to his own cave and builds a fire to warm it. He takes care of the little wolf, and the wolf gradually gets better. The little wolf and Marcos live together in the cave for many years. As Marcos continues to mature, his transformation into a self-assured and self-sufficient individual becomes even more pronounced. With each passing day in the unforgiving wilderness, he hones his survival skills and embraces the challenges that come his way. He evolves into a proficient hunter. He no longer merely scavenges for food, but actively tracks and hunts animals. His knowledge of the forest's rhythms and the habits of its creatures grows. We see that Marcos becomes friends with an owl, the symbol of wisdom, as he shares food with it and knows how to call it to approach him. A remarkable development in Marcos' journey is his mastery of the wolf's language. He patiently observes the little wolf, keenly observes its vocalizations, body language, and subtle communication nuances, and becomes proficient in understanding it. One day, Marcos constructs makeshift wooden wings and attempts to take flight. In the distance, he hears gunshots echoing through the forest, realizing that Ceferino is chasing Thomas, firing his weapon. Unfortunately, one of the shots finds its mark and injures Thomas's knee. Thomas desperately seeks refuge and hides in a nearby cave, unaware that Ceferino and his companion, accompanied by tracking dogs, are hot on his trail. As tension mounts, Marcos swiftly responds to the situation. With quick thinking, Marcos wraps a piece of cloth around Thomas's wounded knee and uses grass to stanch the bleeding. Determined to divert Ceferino and the dogs away from the injured Thomas, Marcos takes a piece of cloth that belongs to Thomas and dashes through the forest, leaving a scent trail for the dogs to follow, leading them away from the cave. Marcos escapes from Ceferino's companion and starts a fire while hunting a rabbit. But Ceferino catches up to him and points a gun at him. Ceferino wants to know where the hidden Balilla member is, but Marcos doesn't say a word. So Ceferino ties Marcos up and attaches the other end of the rope to his horse. He starts pulling Marcos while he rides his horse through the forest. They end up at Anastasio's grave, a place where Marcos remembers his friend. Just then, one of Ceferino's men arrives and tells him that Thomas has escaped, and they couldn't find him anywhere. Ceferino doesn't give up. He asks one of his men to go with him to the countryside, thinking he might find the answers he's looking for about where Thomas is hiding. They ride off into the countryside, continuing their search. Ceferino goes to the countryside and gets into a house. He tells the man very firmly to bring his daughter and leave their village right away. But the man doesn't want to leave the place he's known all his life, so he hesitates and says, "I've lived here all my life." Ceferino gets even more serious and warns the man that he might make him leave if he doesn't tell them where Thomas is hiding. Just then, the man's daughter steps in with a strong voice. She says she knows where Thomas is hiding, and she reveals that he's at the place where his friends are buried. As soon as Ceferino hears this, he hurries off towards the hiding spot, determined to find Thomas. The soldier with him offers to come along, but Ceferino says no because he doesn't want to leave anyone behind to watch Marcos. Back at the house, the father is still confused, so he asks his daughter why she told Ceferino where Thomas is. She says she doesn't really know why, but that she wanted to send Thomas away. She also mentions that tonight is a full moon, and the fog is starting to roll in. Little Wolf, who is really good at sensing things, figures out where Ceferino is while he's riding his horse. The horse starts acting strangely, getting all nervous and jumpy because it knows the wolf is around. Out of nowhere, the wolf jumps at Ceferino, knocking him off his horse and onto the ground. Then the wolf attacks Ceferino's neck quickly and fiercely, and sadly, Ceferino doesn't make it. The wolf's powerful attack ends Ceferino's life right there in the forest. Ceferino's men still have Marcos tied to one of the horses, and they start riding back to town. Little Wolf, however, is not far away. It lets out a loud howl, and Marcos responds with a howl of his own, like they're talking to each other. But the men don't like this. They stop Marcos from making any more noise, and they start riding their horses faster to keep him quiet. They want to make sure Marcos doesn't get a chance to howl and communicate with the wolf again. Now let's fast forward to the year 2010, where we encounter an elderly man who surprises us by being the actual Marcos, the person on whom this movie is based. At this moment, he's riding a bicycle while carrying a gun strapped to his back. Marcos, the real one, howls like he did in his youth. He then does something quite unique. He takes off his shirt and gently lays it on the ground, stretching out beside it. It becomes clear that he's waiting for his old friend, the wolf, to join him. As the minutes pass, the bond between Marcos and the wolf remains strong. When the wolf arrives, they embrace in a warm cuddle, a testament to the enduring connection between man and nature that has defined Marcos' extraordinary life. The film is based on the true story of Marcos Rodriguez Pantoja, a Spanish boy who was raised by wolves in the Sierra Morena Mountains for 12 years. The film follows Marcos' journey from abandonment to acceptance, from fear to understanding, and from boyhood to manhood.